What's up, guys? So just yesterday I got back from my trip to Boston for the APX Boston meet, which was awesome. I think it went really well, and it was really cool seeing some of my other friends that I don't see very often. So I do have more videos coming on that. But this morning I got a call from my bank telling me that I was approved for a loan which I needed to take out to replace my engine. So one thing that I really want to focus on in this series and focus on my channel is what it's really like to own a car, a modified car specifically. I know there's a lot of other channels who, they might run into engine issues or have to rebuild or this or that, but they'll make a video like, hey, my engine blew up. The following video, it gets rebuilt, and then the video after that, they're ripping it on the dyno. So it's not that simple. It's not that easy of a process. There's other things that you have to consider, and if you're like me and you're not rich, or if you don't have a bunch of extra money, just an extra stash laying around somewhere for an engine build, because usually your engine craps out on its own. You don't really always have warnings that it's going to die. So if you're in my situation, it comes up out of the blue and you need to get money fast. So a lot of times you have to get a loan for that, and that's something that people don't always talk about or don't always mention. In this series, I kind of want to show you the behind the scenes process of replacing an engine. Do you replace with OE or do you decide to build? What other things should you upgrade while your engine is out of the car? How do you finance it? How are you going to pay for it? Do you have extra money laying around somewhere, or do you have to get a loan? Do you have to charge it? There's a bunch of things that go into rebuilding an engine that I think get missed by a lot of other channels. And that's cool. Not all of them are meant to cover that. Different channels have different styles. But on my channel, I kind of want to give you the behind the scenes insider information of what goes into that. And I want to show you guys what actually goes into an engine build. So if I could make a video of it happening as it's happening, I think that's going to help a lot of you guys out. So if there's anything that you would like to see me cover or discuss, please let me know. And I will do my best to address those issues. So I just got back from the shop in the bank not too long ago. I didn't film any of it because it was very boring. At the shop, I just walked in and was like, hey, it's time to order that block. And they ordered it for me because we had already talked previously which block would work best for my build. And at the bank, it was just filling out paperwork, which was very boring, and all of it had my personal information on it. So obviously I'm not going to show that, but you didn't miss out on anything. It was boring stuff. I will show you more interesting stuff in the future as my engine gets built and whatnot. But stay tuned for that. In this video, however, I want to focus on the cost and things to consider when building an engine. So first of all, obviously, you need money. If you're balling out of control and you have a stash for your engine, rock on. I didn't. I wasn't planning on my engine, taking a dump, and I've had to build an engine 3 times now, and that's usually how it goes. It just comes up out of the blue one day, like a really mean ex-girlfriend who didn't call, didn't write, who just kind of shows up on your doorstep and is like, hey, let's take care of this. So with that being said, there's usually not much planning that goes into it. If you're fortunate enough and you know that your engine is on the way out, then you can start saving and start planning for it. But my engine really didn't give any warning. And the previous times that I replaced my engine, again, it didn't give any warning. Just a part failed and then I had problems. So for me, I had to get a loan. So that's something that you have to work on. If you're younger, it's going to be very difficult to get a loan, especially if you have no credit history. So you may have to go and have your parents get a loan, or at least have somebody co-sign on a loan. Fortunately, I didn't have to do that because I do have credit at this point, but I've had to do that in the past before, I had established credit. So first of all, think about how you're going to finance it. Think about how you're going to fund your build. It's fun to shop online for car parts and stuff, but you need to be able to pay for it, obviously. So I have 2 estimates here from 6-Star Service, Performance, and Fabrication. One is for an OEM block. One is for the Stage 1 Plus block from IAG, which is what I went with. And I'll talk about that specifically in a minute, why I chose that block. But obviously, depending on what short block you go with is going to affect the price. So to answer that question, how much is it going to cost? It depends on where you're located in the country. It depends on what shop is doing the work, or if you're capable and experienced enough to do your own work, which I wouldn't recommend unless you're an actual
automotive tech. Unless you build engines for a living, I don't recommend building your own, especially on a Subaru. There's a lot of experience and stuff that goes into building an engine, so it's not something like you just follow a manual and you do it and you're good. It's complicated. I'm gonna be real with you guys. It's complicated, and anyone who says otherwise is, I don't know, just lying to themselves or lying to other people. It's not something that I could handle. Even if I had the tools to do it, I wouldn't do it. So, you've got to factor in labor. A lot of shops I know are around $100 an hour, which isn't cheap. So you need to factor in labor. Sometimes people shop online for parts and they come up with their total and they say, oh, that's not bad. It's going to cost $4,000. But they didn't factor in labor. They didn't factor in some of the other parts, seals and things like that need replaced. What block you go with is going to determine the price. One estimate here is for an OEM block, which is about $2,000. The other one is for the IAG Stage 1 Plus block, which is about $3,000. So that right there is a $1,000 price difference. That's really small in the overall cost when you're building an engine. So if you want to build, go ahead and build. If you're going to be replacing your engine, that is certainly the time to do it. But I think a Stage 2 block, most Stage 2 blocks now are still around $3,000 or so, maybe a little bit more. From IAG, it's still $2,999. Stage 3 blocks and beyond, closed deck stuff, blocks that are built for racing. Some of these blocks that rev out to 8,000, 9,000 RPMs, especially on a Subaru, is pretty insane. Those are going to cost a whole hell of a lot more than your standard block. Big name companies like Cosworth is going to cost a whole hell of a lot more than some blocks. And that's not to say that IAG isn't a top-notch company. It absolutely is. But it doesn't have the same pedigree that Cosworth has. Cosworth can charge a hell of a lot because their name is Cosworth. So if you're going with a Cosy block or a long block, if you're getting heads done as well, and you're going to get cams done and stuff like that, all of that adds up. So first of all, figure out what you're doing. Are you just replacing your block with a OEM block because you want maximum longevity? Or are you going to be making a little bit more power and you want to go with a Stage 1 or a Stage 2 block? All of that is going to factor into your price. So that right there, at least halfway answers your question for how much it's going to cost. Figure out what you're going to build and what you need to build. And I will say this, it's something that not a lot of people talk about, and I rarely see it on the Subaru community where people discuss this, but bigger is not always better. And I've already got this question a handful of times on this specific build. Why did you go with a Stage 1 Plus block? Basically, that is the block that is best suited for my needs. The turbo I have is an 18G 50 trim turbo from B&R Supercars. I highly recommend this turbo if you're looking for a good turbo on a budget. It's a budget price turbo. It's like $700, but it performs as well as any other journal bearing turbo in my experience. No, it's not ball bearing, and it's not, doesn't have a billet turbine wheel. But honestly, you don't need that stuff for a daily driver, and you don't need that stuff unless you're making big power and you want instant power. So a lot of that stuff that's real fancy is overkill. But my turbo is capable of about 400 wheel horsepower, assuming I have all the supporting mods, which I do, and assuming that it's tuned and set up properly, which it's going to be. On my first rebuild engine, it was making 380 to the wheels on a Dynojet, and that was with my not my OEM injectors. I had DW 740cc injectors. Since then, my last build, I upgraded those to 1300cc injector dynamic top feed injectors. And I actually have a video with all my mods talking about that, and also all my mods are on my Wheelwell page, so go check that out if you want to see my specific mods that are done to the car. I will be talking about it more in the future, but I could get off track very easily talking about other mods. But my point is, for the way the car is set up right now, 400 wheel horsepower is really the max power that it's capable of making. And I'm fine with that. 400 wheel horsepower is a hell of a lot of power for an all-wheel drive car. And right now we have the horsepower wars going on where, you got Hellcats and demons running around. But 400 horsepower is still a ton of power, especially on a daily driver. So don't just look at the numbers and say, oh, 400 isn't that much. It's a good bit. So it's perfect for a daily driver, in my opinion. Once you go over 400 wheel horsepower or 450, you really get into a realm where your car is not fully drivable. And by that, I mean you can't go full throttle without being into a wall somewhere. And if you follow other YouTubers, I'm sure you do, they talk about it all the time. You know, when you're making way more horsepower, you cannot ever go full throttle. And it kind of takes away some of the fun of the car. So for my build, for my car, it's a daily driver, and I am perfectly happy with 400 wheel horsepower, which is why I stuck with a Stage 1 Plus block. That block is basically rated for 400 wheel horsepower, which is all I want. The Stage 2 block from IAG is capable of about 650 horsepower at the crank, which I believe is closer to 500 some at the wheels, 550 maybe. Not exactly sure. But yeah, beyond that, I just don't need a Stage 2 block. Even though it's the same price, I don't need it. And I think a Stage 1 Plus is going to give me better longevity and reliability over a Stage 2 or a Stage 3 block. So build your engine for what you're going to use it for. It would be cool to have a closed deck block. It would be cool to have a lot of things, but I just don't need it. And just because it's bigger doesn't mean it's better. Just because you go with a Stage 4 block doesn't mean it's going to last longer. It doesn't mean it's going to drive better. And that applies to a lot of parts, not just your engine block. So keep that in mind when you're building your car. Keep that in mind when you're building your turbo. Whatever you're working on, you know, you should build your car for the power level it's going to be. It's okay to overbuild some things, but please don't think that just because you throw in a Stage 4 block that costs $8,000 for just the short block, that your car is going to be invincible and it's going to last forever. And I'll say this, having built my engine for the third time now, the last 3 failures, none of them had to do with, the piston rings. A lot of people talk about, ringland failure, bro. I never had a problem with the ringland failure. I've never had a problem until this one with the bearings. I've never had a problem with the head studs stretching or stuff like that. I've never had an issue with, well, my last engine blew up, but that was because it leaned out because the MAF sensor went bad. But I wasn't making so much horsepower that I actually blew out like a piston wall. So a lot of these things that, websites put out, that manufacturers put out, that circulate on the forums about, well, you need a closed deck block because XYZ. If you're building a race car, maybe closed deck is the right option for you. But please don't think that just because you go with a closed deck block, that's going to make it last forever. Or, whatever the part is or whatever the modification is, please don't think that just going with a race car part is going to make it last longer, because that is not true, and that nothing could be further from the truth. So again, build your car for the power that you're going to be. With that being said, I'm going to show you guys these estimates on what you could expect to pay. Obviously, this is from 6-Star Service, Performance, and Fabrication. And your shop is probably going to vary, but this should give you a ballpark. A lot of this stuff is just the replacement parts that they need. There's a lot of seals and other things that go into it that you don't typically think about. Bolts, some cam gears they just replace. And as I said, it depends on what happened to your engine. Is your engine just getting old and it needs a refresh? Or did you literally blow a hole through the block like my last engine did? My last engine, I had to replace a lot of stuff as well. Oil pump probably always should be replaced. But my last one actually had shrapnel and debris go through several things. So that had to be replaced. I think part of the power steering pump bracket had to be replaced because of the carnage that ensued after the explosion. But all of those factor into your price. So that right there is your answer. How much does it cost? It depends on who's doing the work. It depends on what block you're using. It depends on what other parts you are upgrading, which I will be upgrading other parts that aren't listed on this invoice, this estimate right now. But I'll discuss those in a minute. And it depends on a bunch of different factors. But I'm hoping that this here can give you a ballpark idea on how expensive it is to replace an engine. Because trust me, it's not $5,000 for a Subaru. It costs a lot more than that, assuming you're replacing the short block and everything like that. So with that being said, I'm going to show you guys what I have here. So this estimate here is for the IAG block, and this one on the right is with the Subaru OEM block. So both of these are identical with the exception of the block, but here you go. Labor. You need to remove the engine, and these are both broken down. They're more detailed on exactly what each of these entails. But you have to remove it. You have to disassemble it. You're going to have to reassemble it. You're going to have to reinstall it. And this also covers, their first startup and break-in oil, the oil change and stuff like that. The cylinder head service. Your heads need to be serviced, especially if your car has been driving for a while. My car was just rebuilt a couple years ago, so my heads are probably still in good shape. But if it's the first time you're rebuilding your engine, there's a good chance that they'll have to machine these down a little bit to make sure that they fit with the new short block and they aren't warped. And that's replacing valves and gaskets and stuff like that. Like I said, your individual engine is going to be different. It depends on what's going on. But your head service is going to cost money. Obviously, the short block here, and that price is from IAG. A gasket kit. I have an oil pump, an oil pan, and an oil pickup on this estimate. And it's a good idea just to replace these items because all of them are in the oil, and assuming that you have shrapnel or metallic shavings like I do, these are all going to be contaminated with that. And if you reuse them, then it's very likely that that shrapnel or the metallic fragments are going to circulate through your new engine and damage other components, and you'll have to replace an engine much, much sooner. So this oil pickup, I actually have a Killer Bee unit installed, and that is much easier to clean than the OEM unit, so it is possible that I might be able to reuse that. The oil pan is similar. It's possible that you can reuse it if you can clean it well enough. However, this is only $120, so it's not a bad idea just to replace it and be on the safe side. And the oil pump is pretty much always going to have debris or metallic shavings in that. So just replace the oil pump, because if you don't, you're going to be circulating debris through a brand new engine, and it's going to blow it up, and then you're going to be screwed and have to pay for 2 engines instead of 1. So yes, these are things that, you could look at and say, hey, I already have them. They aren't damaged directly, but they are all going to be contaminated. A timing belt kit is also a good idea to replace. Mine was just replaced 2 years ago, so maybe I could reuse mine. We'll see. Spark plugs should be replaced, and all this other stuff. These cam gears as well are going to be basically tainted, contaminated, so it's a good idea just to replace those as well. Also, your oil cooler is going to have crap in it. So this is my estimate for an OEM short block. As I pointed out, a lot of this price is labor, and that's just the nature of rebuilding an engine. It's not easy to rebuild an engine, and it's not fast. So a lot of labor and time goes into this. And obviously I have sales tax in PA at 7%. And here is the same estimate with the, this has the OEM short block, which is $2,100. And this estimate here has my IAG block. So when you're going for an engine build, you might think, hey, I really would like to go with a built block, but OEM is cheaper. And that was my mentality the first time I rebuilt my engine. And honestly, I don't think I had an extra $1,000 for a built block. But whenever you look at the overall cost, you'll see that it's only about $1,000 more. So my total for an OEM block is $7,400, and it could be more than that, it could be less than that. It really depends on what's going on. But say $7,400, and this one is $8,300. So $900 difference between the two. That is something that you really have to consider. So when you're looking at parts and you're pricing everything out, yes, an OEM block is cheaper, but it's not that much cheaper in the grand scheme of things. And obviously, if you go with a built block and you go with other things, those prices can add up very quickly. But that's something to think about, if you're debating between an OEM block and a built block, because I was in that situation before, and I debated about that for, I don't know, weeks. It felt like forever. It was probably a week or two. And I just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. OEM block or built block. And I could not decide. Ultimately, I went with an OEM block, which I do not regret. It really didn't last long enough to matter. But if you're thinking about that, you have to look at the overall cost, because going with a built block really isn't that much more expensive than OEM. With that being said, I am going to be replacing some other things as well while my engine is being built. My intake manifold, I'm going to have re-powder coated because mine looks like crap. The powder coat is starting to fade and peel in some areas. Actually, it's not starting to peel, it's just starting to wear off. It is the original powder coat from the factory, so I'm going to get that re-powder coated, wrinkle finish red, most likely. I would love to do the neon yellow that I did my brakes. I think that would look cool, but that's way too much. And as I've said in previous videos and in live streams, you know, that's a color that can be overdone very easily. And I'm very picky about that. I don't want to overdo it. So that would be a cool color, but that's too much for me. It's something Ken Block would do, and I am not Ken Block. So I'm happy with re-powder coating that wrinkle red finish. It's going to be nice and bright and wrinkly. And the other thing on my engine that I know I want to add is the IAG air oil separator. Right now I have the Grimspeed unit and it works, but I would give it about a 3 stars, meaning it works, but it doesn't work as well as it should. It's much better than having nothing, but I know it's not doing everything that it should be doing. So, oh, and the other thing with the Grimspeed unit, not to knock Grimspeed, but it is a huge pain in the ass to have to carry around a 19mm socket, which I always carry a ratchet set in my car, so I already have that, but it is a huge pain in the ass to carry around a 19mm socket just to change my oil. If I want to add oil, I obviously have to use a ratchet to get to my oil fill neck, which sucks. Like, what the hell? So I'm very excited about the the IAG unit. That's going to be awesome. I'm getting that. I think that's about $400 for the street version, which is better for daily drivers. They also have a race version, which really doesn't, you know, matter if you're racing your car, because you do a lot more maintenance on a race car and it's not the same situation as a daily driver. But the street version is like $400, so I'm also changing that. As far as the engine, everything else I'm planning on keeping. Everything else should be good to go. I don't want to change anything. I'm happy with the way it's set up. At some point, I don't know if it's going to happen when I get my engine rebuilt or shortly after, or maybe next year. But Cobb finally released their flex fuel kit for the GD series STIs, which is my car. I've been waiting for this, I think about 3 years at this point. They've been talking about releasing flex fuel. So I do want to go flex fuel. I do want to go E85. And I'm not sure exactly when that's going to happen, but that's going to happen at some point. So as I said, I don't know if that's going to happen right now. I have other priorities, but that's going to happen. Also, while my car is being rebuilt, I plan on having my brake calipers taken off and done professionally. I did the powder coat myself, and it turned out great, but it is not holding up as well as I had hoped. I have some hairline fractures starting in the clear coat on the front brakes. The back brakes look better, but I'll probably just have them all done at the same time. But I'm getting some hairline fractures in the clear coat. I'm not sure exactly why. And the driver's side is starting to fade. I believe it's from the sun, not heat, because my passenger side brake is not fading nearly as fast. And that might be the powder coat that I used. The Glow Be Clear that I used to make them glow in the dark, I do not believe that is UV stable. So that is probably why that's acting weird. And I'm getting some stains in under the clear coat. I'm not sure exactly why. And as I stated in the video, I'm not a professional powder coater, but it turned out great for a while. It's lasted about 6 months, and it still looks okay, but it's not as fresh as it used to be. So while I'm not going to be driving my car, I figured I would take advantage of this opportunity and just have them done, so I don't have to worry about, you know, trying to drive my car without brakes. Obviously, I can't do that, but that would mean that I couldn't drive my car if I took them off at a separate time. So this way, the shop has time to do the brakes. They have time to do my intake manifold. I might have 1 or 2 other things powder coated by that shop at the same time. And the shop is totally baked powder coating. More Performance and 6-star Service do not do powder coating, but they know people who do. So it's going to be totally baked powder coating doing that work. I believe. I haven't talked to that shop yet, but hopefully we'll see. Hopefully I could get some videos from professionals powder coating my stuff, and maybe they'll even give us some tips and tricks on your own powder coating. So I think that would be really cool. But as far as my engine goes, that's what I'm going with. Basically, just think of it as replacing the short block. I'm not really changing anything else. Everything else works fine. The reason I'm replacing it is because I have metal fragments, or I'm sorry, like metal, just metallic shavings, really, in my oil, and it's making a really bad knocking sound. So it's not that I'm just upgrading power or anything. I just need a new short block. Everything else, I am happy with how it is, and I'm going to add my air oil separator and a couple other goodies here and there. I'll be sure to let you guys know what those are if I think of anything else. But that is basically the rundown of my financial situation on this build. So I just wanted to make this video so you can see how much an engine build costs, ballpark. Because as I said, it's like people will have an engine issue. The next episode, they're ripping it on a dyno, and they don't discuss how much it costs, which is cool. I get that. But my channel's a little bit different than some other channels, and I kind of want to give you guys the behind the scenes information that is involved in building an engine. So if you guys have any other comments, questions, concerns, gripes, complaints, you name it, drop it in the comment section down below. Please give this video a like, because that really helps me out in my small growing channel, which just earlier today we passed 5,700 subscribers. Shout out to you bros, and I will catch you guys next time.